Nays? Ayes have it. Number 3, new business, nonprofit signage. Jeff, can I call on you for this, please?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. It's not my intention to take up a lot of time with this, but I was approached by 2 different entities, one several months ago, which was the Eldridge Lions Club, and most recently the Eldridge United Methodist Church, asking about nonprofit signage. Currently, Eldridge City Code doesn't have any provisions for nonprofits or nonprofit signs. The Lions Club wanted to put up one more sign. They currently have 3 available in town. They wanted to put one to the east on LeClaire Road. At that time, I said there wasn't a provision, and I had talked about, seeking guidance from City Council or Planning and Zoning on that. But they didn't return or follow up the request. Just last week, a representative of the Eldridge United Methodist Church came in. They currently have 1 sign, a directional sign on South First Street. As you're traveling south that points to the church, they were asking for one to put on the other side of the street, a directional sign for people that are traveling north. They said that people used to drive past the church a lot when that was the only way to get out of town on the south side of town. But now, since there's multiple exits, they feel like people don't know where they are. So my question is, do you see the need to revise the code for some type of nonprofit signage provision? And if so, if you have any input on that, I'd like to hear it. But I am happy to work with Public Works Department to come up with something similar to the other entities City Code talks about, as far as the size of the sign, where they can go, that type of thing, to come up with some guidelines. But I don't know. Trying to reduce the number of signs we had all over town, so I don't want to add too many back.
Signs for private businesses.
Yep, correct.
I think there's a room to have nonprofits, but whatever it would be, at least to take consideration.
Yeah, that's correct. There's just currently, when I went back to check the city code specifically for nonprofits, there's just really not anything in there dealing specifically with them, except for church bulletins. That's the only thing that's in there.
It's just silent on
it. So in the memo, I've got I'll put up on the screen there. So currently, these are the nonprofit signs that I saw around town when I did a little survey. So basically, there's no provisions for any of these signs. So at the current time, all of these signs would basically be illegal. But we can change that if you would like, and I can work with Public Works to come up with some kind of guidance for them.
Would I make your? So it would make these legal?
Legal or illegal, I don't have a preference either way. I mean, if they're illegal and you don't want this type of signage around town, we should take them down. If you'd like to make a provision to make them legal, I'm happy to work with Public Works to make an ordinance amendment to regulate them.
Well, yeah, I think if we can work something out to allow signs like this organization.
So agree. I think we need to support the nonprofits.
Very important to us here in Eldridge. I do want to point out, though, that it looks really nice with the big sign, and then when you have so many little signs, it kind of gets lost and almost, I don't want to say bigger sign to meet them all and maybe have them in a couple areas of town, that'd be better than a bunch of singles all over town. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with Public Works, and then once we get something worked out, we'll get an amendment together and bring it back to you. So, thank you.
In the meantime, please don't take those down.
No problem.
Consensus is to have Jeff work on something with Public Works. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. On number 4, 4A, fiscal year 26 max tax levy and budget discussion. Nevada, I'll turn it over to you.
Official here tonight. He'll go through his department budget. Do you want to start with the tax levy and do that first?
All 4 of you can go with the 811.
Yep. That's our max levy. Doesn't mean we
Right.
can't lower it. We just can't raise it.
Okay.
For consensus.
One other things for this evening.
Public hearing for that tax levy.
Vote on that during the regular meeting.
No, it'll get, does not need a separate action. Do your budget, Ray?
Sure.
Sorry, he's a general fund. He's going to be on the page 3 of your budget.
Same as it is every year. There's not too many changes. Last year, because we adopted new codes, all of the building codes, we shouldn't have a lot of expenses this year, although the state of Iowa by July, so I may need 2 of those, and those are my most expensive books. Rules, the next line down. Class that we typically get CEUs for, and 3-day session that is in Des Moines. And the reason I go to the 2 of those, that's my budget line item there. And also, code professional, I have to have 65 hours every 3 years, and that gives me enough. So that helps with that. Give me, and I'm very happy that you just leave it there in case. Can I answer any questions?
Randy,
Nice job.
with the kind of unusually warmer winter we've had, have you seen more buildings coming in for new construction?
No, in fact, and I can give a report now on the building code if you'd like. For the first time in 9 years since I've been at Eldridge, I'm slow. Very. And a half, I started getting some phone calls on some things coming in. And so I do think that we're going to have a few things that'll pop up. Today, for instance, I received permit application for a Verizon store to go into Suite 1 of 600 East LeClaire. That's the hardware store. Arthur Building Materials is coming into the old IBEV building. They've got a permit to sprinkle that building. So that, in fact, they're working on it. They did water and sewer this week. So that's moving. Then, of course, we have the subdivision with the North Scott Schools and the subdivision for Grimwald Second to be approved tonight. Both of those. And I was contacted today for another 4 starting to pick back up. But over the last 6 weeks, I've gone through 15 years of old building permits and just all here. And nobody ever called for a final, and I didn't know what it was. So we cleaned out the files this winter, but
How do you envision that? Because doesn't look like we're gonna have any this year. Would that be you had to get somebody to come out and cover for you if you're gone, or?
the overtime budget or when I actually work overtime. I did have about 2-3 years where my $1,000 a year into my overtime, and there were 2 years in a row where I just blew that. I've had no. So larger expenditures in the previous years. We're on a side note, Scott County with Greg Schoffeldt and Jamie Just. We have been helping each other with inspections because they only have one inspector also. And so I've done a few for them out in the county. Jamie has come into town and done a few for us. For, I'm sure Port Byron, maybe Coal Valley, and I've asked them to cover for me on commercial and industrial. So we may be working on that here in the next few weeks to see about getting him signed up as one of my backups for when I'm gone.
Inventory, right?
Construction. Yep. Yay or nay?
Okay.
Steve's pretty good. He's very knowledgeable, and he doesn't, he understands that we're not here to over-enforce it code. It's literally the crap allowed by law, and that's all we enforce.
See anything on the horizon of getting some new candidates into the field? I know that seems like the Quad Cities has really been struggling.
Quad Cities is struggling right now. Davenport recently had an applications being taken for 2 permit techs are on the same pay scale as inspectors, and they did not have a great turnout, although I do think through the interview process, they did find 2 people that may be working out for them. Otherwise, in the Quad City area, from other building officials that there's nobody coming into the pipeline. And so when these jobs come up, nobody with any certifications is really applying for them. And getting your first certification is not all that hard, so if you know anybody that's interested, I can give them a step on how to get it. And then the next job that comes up, they would have an advantage. So.
Go through some of the changes from the last draft, and then I'd like to just quickly talk through the departments we haven't touched on yet and give some of the highlights from those departments. And then at that point, kind of circle back to each of the funds and go through which projects, which line items the council has questions and direction on. That's okay? At our last meeting, the police department had the equipment, the proposed equipment purchases in their budget. That has been changed to zero out of their budget. It is coming out of the admin budget to go to the equipment replace. There's $240,000 in that line, $190,000 for PD and $50,000 for future equipment. 002, you'll see that all of the funds for equipment purchase, road use, sewer, the general fund admin, and the capital streets account. And it accounts for all of the equipment purchases that are proposed for fiscal year 26, which would be the field drag and the gator for parks, the PD equipment, and then the snowplow for the public works department. The other change that was discussed at the last meeting was the wages. So what I did, just to make this process a little easier and to avoid having those changes in all of the budget lines throughout the process, I put together a table that was sent out to you today that shows the fiscal year end wage amounts for each department. What each of those wage lines would be at 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, and 4%. That direction, that final budget if needed. So right now there's
offering their Teamsters 1.5%, which I think is low, but you know, Davenport came up. All their truck drivers 1.5%.
Shade's very
yeah.
uniform. They both start way over here, when they know they're gonna end up here. And it's always frustrated me. I'd rather be a realist and go in there with close to what you need and not play those games bad.
Yeah.
Try to guess where they're gonna be. It's hard to say, somewhere between 2.5%, 3%, somewhere in there. Who knows? Negotiation. I think the county came out in their budget, they're gonna be around 3.25%.
Lines that we haven't, the different funds that we haven't done yet for the budget. Most of them are pretty straightforward. We've got the sanitation. Page right after your streets and the general. For the sanitation fund, our Republican Allied contract ends on 12/31/2025. We're currently at 2,184 households. The increase with our contract this year with them is went from 1,551 to 1,597. For vehicle maintenance, the maintenance costs are projected based on the averages from the last 4 years from those departments. PD maintenance has been increasing. That's just due to the age of the fleet. That may be decreased from what's budgeted this year, depending on purchases for that fleet and what the council moves forward with. There may be some maintenance cost that's decreased out of that line due to having new fleet. Fund is, that's where we've allocated the for instance, the same as last year's, we increased that administrative, which is Fund 611. That's where that equipment replacement has been reallocated. That was originally $1,000 for future equipment. The miscellaneous administration line has just over $60,000. That's going to cover our ADP fees, which is our time and attendance, MRA, which is our and then our Y at work, and therefore potential the wages would be allocated. Where you'll see 232,252. That's where the different funds are coming from the adjustments that have been made so far at the direction of the council for this budget. Some of the things that we may consider with those contingency funds before getting to the point of adopting the budget would be setting aside some contribution money for the housing tax credit applications for projects. Street wages, we did bring those down to the projected amount for the current staff. There is an operations manager position that's going to be vacant when Brian West. So one of our current labor workers could be promoted into that position. It would still be well below where we're at with Brian currently, but it does give that opportunity for growth, and it was in the original proposed budget. And then also looking at adding some money back into the PD wages. The officers are the last category of employees. We may want to anticipate those discussions and doing a wage search on the officer wages and putting in some money to be able to cover that. So theirs would be separate from what's negotiated for the July 1 increases because the other departments have been adjusted, so we would not want to include that in the July 1st.
We can talk about that later, but they're the only ones that get shift differential and all different things there. To me, the point to discuss that is through negotiation. If you look at our wages and the county wages, now the county just jacked theirs up, but some of the other towns, I don't think we're out of line. We may need to tweak a little. I don't know why that can't be done during negotiations. Versus
verification will be done through the negotiations process. Allocating some additional funding to that wage line. Fund, you'll see an increase in our computer maintenance. That's to cover, we have ERP Pro 10 now with our Tyler technology. That's our billing management, employee management software. We have moved over to cloud-based, and now we're going to our Pro 10 version, which gives us a lot more capabilities of what we can do with that system. But it is more costly, and so accounting for that. Our security cameras, our new website, and then our Civic Plus, which is the archiving of our social media posting. We've increased the amount set aside for our audit because in addition to our annual financial audit, we are incurring some more accounting services to help keep us in compliance and to get our financial funds straightened out to be in compliance with the regulations from the federal and the state level for our accounting. Our general insurance, you'll see, is budgeted lower. That's because we had significantly lower costs for fiscal year 25 than what we were anticipating at the time. We are expecting normal renewals, nothing out of line for those, but we may put an additional 5 or 10 grand out of what we've got set aside just to cover that if we get any unexpected increases. We should know those in the next probably month and a half.
City's membership jumped so much.
Which other dues it covers, but there are other things. I can get a printout of the detail in that, but there are some different memberships that are covered in that line. Yeah. Yeah, it was
But there's probably some miscellaneous stuff like that.
And moving into sales tax, just to touch on some of those, that's going to be in your special, that'll be in the next tab, right after road use. 21. Some of the big items for sales tax in this budget, you'll see that our Stream Bank and SQR is significantly lower. We are almost through those, and the rest of those funds in this next fiscal year, so that is set matching. Within the Clare Traffic Signal Project, budgeted into the sales tax account as well. Our transit study grant that we are applied for with Bettendorf, LeClaire, and Davenport will come out of sales tax. It was budgeted at about $3,300. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It's looking for a little bit larger split, so we can, we may be looking at a couple thousand. Some different things that could be used for that would be your sidewalk infill, Sheridan Meadows project. You can take some from reserves to do some more of those type of projects if you wanted, but sales tax can pretty much cover any of those items. For the hotel motel tax fund, which should be your next page for Fund 122. So we did put it in again this year for council to consider. There's also the $5,000 in there that we actually spend with our public works services on garbage receptacles. We also added additional money for flowers. We've had residents. So it may be an additional cost to the city.
Revenues, we have 16,000 from sales tax.
Correct.
Should we leave that 16,000 in sales tax and bring 16 more out of the
Sales tax?
well, we have more flexibility with sales tax. You know, I don't see us get on hotel motel and spend it for
was going back to the general fund and just going to the contribution. Clarification that I'd be looking at from council is put line item in for 50,000 for a full-time employee based on the discussions that we have been with the fire department, and just making sure the understanding was correct that that was set aside in our funds to be held on to for future department needs for employees, and it was not meant to be paid out at the end of the year. I just want to make sure that that was a correct understanding. I do have some financials from the fire department that I can provide to you as far as where they're at with their current budget, as far as their grant funding as well. Aside from the franchise fees and our traditional contribution that we make, do we want to set aside any additional funds in this budget? If so, do we want to start a capital project fund to be able to hold and track those funds, or what would be the thoughts from council on how to move forward with that?
Earmark for the fire department?
Years, it would be more easily tracked and easier to spend those funds in the future if we put them into it. Otherwise, if it's in a contingency line and it's not specifically allocated to something, it's just going to roll over to the general fund reserves without being defined or allocated to anything else in our next fiscal year. Just
agree with that, because if a full-time person isn't hired, it should go back to the general fund. That's discussions we'll have to have with the fire department if they're serious about it. $60,000 for the gas franchise fee. You put that in the, yep. I mean, I don't know if it'd be totally enough, depends on wages, and then we have to discuss who's insurance, and that's Pandora's box, all that, but at least there's currently money there at council with that 40,000 in contingency if we want to do something.
Is there a benefit for the capital fund, though, that we put it into the fire department now, because we know that we've kind of been in talks with them for quite some time now. We know it's coming. We don't have a timeline yet, but we're working on a timeline. Is there a benefit to having a capital expenditure for future trucks, for future entities that they're going to need, not just the amount of labor that we're going to have, but I'm looking at equipment and trucks and stuff. So I just want to know if there's a benefit to that, instead of just leaving it in the general fund and using it when you need it. You know, can we earmark it now, and will that help us in the future?
that would be the benefit of doing the capital project fund. Stay in that capital project fund and it wouldn't roll over. It would be for the fire department. And if that happens, if the department does transition to a city department, or if we decide to hire a full-time fire employee, then that would mean we would transition that fire department to a city. All of those assets and everything, which can be very costly for the general fund. So that would be the benefit of starting the capital project fund that we could track going forward.
Dissolves and they're within a city is supplied more than 50% of their annual revenue. All the assets automatically are transferred to the
That's
city.
the way I understand it as well.
Now, if we want to put that 40,000 into something, I don't know if they'll be needing turnout here. Air packs is probably the best. Above and beyond what we normally give them.
double what they used to be. You know, we used to be able to get a tanker or, you know, a frontline truck for $750,000 free. And it's taken 2 to 3 years to get the truck. So I think we're online, we have good trucks at this time, but I think they need to start looking at new trucks now to get them in 3 years. So that's why I think a capital improvement fund would be a smart way to go for us.
Future, and we know it's gonna be expensive, so why not start now?
Improvement, leave the 40 in contingency, or do we just turn that over to capital improvement?
Fund allocated as much as we can to public services, equipment purchases, to any, allocating it to a specific purpose as much as we can. It's not preferred by the state. They want to know specifically what projects and what expenditures we're going to be that allocated as much as we can to specific projects. The preferred way to go with the
Fire department and just label it.
general fund, or putting it over to a creative fund, like a 300 fund for
100 fund for the fire department and just call it equipment.
Want to use some of that though for future staffing. Could you do that under the line item? That's what you need to get started out of the gate. What's going to be the most needed?
the purpose of them is to be multi-year and planning for future projects. So I think just even starting a capital project with a line item that just says future capital project. And just allocating it to that, because that can really
The train off the tracks, but it might not be a bad idea to consider this for a new public works building at City Hall too.
So just start putting some money away to it for the future. We're taking 188,000, my numbers might be wrong on the first number, but we're taking 188,000 out of sales option to balance the budget.
off of past contributions. If we removed that 50,000 in the contingency line to any of those wage lines, capital, but whatever the council wants to direct that 232,000.
I'd like to see sidewalks and something set aside for Sheridan Meadows. You know, we've got, so that's coming close. I don't want to lose traction on that. There are two things that I'd like to see us allocate some money if we've got some excess available.
Other input on Ryan's suggestion?
Great. But I think also for the public works, and we're gonna have expenses trying to get a layout, conceptual layout and all that. And we need to build a building, get us out of the old cat plant sooner than later. And we have to do this, but that 232, we could make that 132 and put 100,000 over into, we'll plan for future municipal buildings.
I'm thinking the same thing about the fire department. We should be putting at least $100,000 a year in for that, to build that up, because the truck's over $1 million. Otherwise, we're gonna have to bond, or we're gonna, how are we gonna pay for that fire truck?
Well, if they pay for it, they can get a bank note on it. Our fire department gets a new truck, they can get a bank note on it and pay it off.
So we all agree, the consensus is we should plan for the future for public work in City Hall. So now we're in this budget, we might as well have them put in something for that, like you said, municipal buildings. And I think we should do something for the fire department, so they can plan for truck, future air packs. That cover add-ons or remodeling on the building itself then?
For fire,
Mm-hmm.
if we eventually take that over.
Okay.
Yeah, then we would own that building, we would be responsible for all the repairs.
But
Finishing up.
I thought you said a minute ago, I don't remember how you worded it, there's a way that would allow us to earmark for the fire department, but have flexibility to go towards wages and or equipment.
If we keep it here in our funds, if we're not paying it out to them, then we hold on to it, and then when, if and when that happens with the fire department, then we would have whatever set aside in that capital project fund to be
Okay.
able to fund projects for their building, their wages, whatever
Okay.
expenses would come up for that.
I don't disagree with your recommendation too, but I think as close as we are to the budget right now, I like Brian's idea of if you put that 100,000 of that and earmark that towards a capital project for future City Hall. We did 40,000 an earmark last year. If you want to change that to another capital project for the fire department, let's keep it at 40 this year to match what we did last year. Let's continue our conversations with the fire department and see exactly where we. I haven't talked to him yet, and I know it's coming sooner than later, but I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse either. I know that,
We're trying to hold on,
yeah.
so.
Well, they really need some help. Anymore, 3, 4, 5 calls a day, anywhere from Parkview, Donahue to Eldridge. If they had somebody there to do the administrative side, it would take a load off those guys.
But still don't rule out a county-wide fire department.
Sure, then it'd be funded through countywide tax.
There have been talks of regional.
That brings up another question too then, when we do take over the fire department, do we still get that county tax then that they receive? Would that still come into us to cover the county with that?
That's a minor amount of their budget. What do they get, 40 or 50 grand a year? District 3,
Somewhere around there,
where we're putting in
169. 60 for the franchise.
So it would depend on whether we signed the 28E to continue serving. funds that they're currently getting from the county would be in those areas outside of.
Talking about that we would possibly have to take this over.
I think that the fire department has been looking to us for years. And, you know, we do move it at a very slow pace, but we're very careful, we're very cautious. But I think they're trying to set up a timeline with us right now for the end of the year to next year, doing the takeover.
I mean, you look at our police department budget, they're
Yeah.
triple that.
Yeah.
There's no way we can stay under the max of, or debt levy and all that. Some concessions from the state or some of. Yeah. There's comments on that. They were about 30,000. Today. 10,000 range. Here.
Need to talk with Comanche more serious about it. I know there's been some discussion with Leclerc, but I think Comanche would be.
They're looking for a staff of 4, but I think they're looking for a paid chief and maybe a paid, so they're looking for probably 2 sooner than later. And then still volunteers, I think they're okay with that, but they're looking for day help, you know, that can really help out. And like Brian said, for the administrative side too.
Yeah. Figure out how to swing that. If you're 20 people, 25 people,
I'm not.
there's no way we can do that under the.
Job description and stuff like that?
Yeah, we just recently, Keith sent over a finalized one that looks good. So, I mean, we're ready to schedule the next meeting.
I mean, those discussions,
So I guess you guys need to decide whether you want that to be a meeting with the safety committee, whether you want that to be a committee of the whole with everybody, or how you want to proceed with that would be the next step.
The whole, because there's a couple things we have to discuss. Attract a good candidate, we have to give benefits. And I don't think the fire department's in a position to give benefits. So there'd be some sort of understanding that ultimately the city would have to hire those 2 people to give them benefits. And they would actually report to the city and work with the fire department.
Insurance company's not gonna like that.
No, they,
Understand that we can't hire a full-time fire department employee without the fire department being a city department that at that time that they hired a full employee. So it's an employee if they so choose, or if we hired a full-time chief, then we would also be taking on the department as a city department. There would be there's not a way for us to hire a full-time chief and not take the volunteer fire department as a city department at that point.
we're far from that. close to being able to do that.
Loss of insurance.
Right.
For that individual or two individuals.
But they're not gonna be able to get into, as a private entity, they're not gonna be able to get into IFRS.
15% or an accumulated 15% between employer and.
I think you should start that process of,
I mean,
in a community.
Yeah, then we just need to add that to an agenda. I mean, do you wanna finish up this budget stuff and then do that like in an April meeting, or are you looking, I mean?
Yeah.
We should keep it going.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we were waiting for several months, was the job description to be finalized, and we got it.
April's a good goal.
I hear consensus, you're kind of, so would you guys agree then to have Nevada and Letty put something in for the city side in the budget for future building and grounds for City Hall, Public Works, and then that 40,000, even though it rolled over back to the general fund, if we have them put a line item that we hold on to that and make it so it has flexibility, go towards wages, that's an old number. There's been cost of living, inflation, materials have went up, all that kind of stuff. It's probably an outdated number. I don't know if we want to go in at 100 right now, but would you think of going up to 50 or 75 for the fire department? Because like I said, that's an outdated number.
It's going to be worst case scenario. We do have funds if we had to get through 1 year. We do have.
To come out of an admin to go to a capital project. And then you said you wanted some to go towards a capital project for public facilities.
Brian had mentioned 100,000, and I'm on board. We know we've gotta get a step closer.
Talked about that a couple meetings ago and last meeting a little bit too, how for as slow as we operate, we need to get that process started right and get that building up there.
I'm just taking 100,000 out of that.
232, so 140 out of that, there's still about 91,000. I don't know if there is any, about either of the wage lines for the street operations manager or for the police officers, or for workforce housing tax credit applications for city contribution. There's about 91,000 left. In minor projects and sales tax. So I know we've heard sidewalks in Sheridan Meadows. Seventeenth to finish these discussions up before we get into the April meetings.
I would be in favor of setting aside 50 for project. Or to put something there to help with that.
Right now the budget's calculated at 3.5%.
Whichever way it would go.
Wages, it depends on the program for police department. If we
South First Street, we can tip.
Sidewalks, we can try to tip that. We would have to get an amendment before we could. Since we can't do it with the South First Street project. It would
Correct.
have to be its own.
It has to be its own project, but we can tip that.
It would be the next year's, the fiscal year 20.
Grant that did that study, wasn't it?
That until the end of the year.
Brian, when you talk about sidewalks, we just got that survey back ago, and there's a lot of sidewalks in the old part of town. So were you including all sidewalks in general, or what did you mean by that?
I just mean we need to get the ball rolling, and I think South First Street seems to be a priority for sidewalks from the people I talk to, but I don't want to take away from the older neighborhoods too that do need. This year, start getting ahead of it.
Right away. Some of the older neighborhoods like Frank lives in, I don't know where the backer streets, it might be pretty narrow. For those, we'd have to go through acquisitions to obtain easements, possibly.
Special committee of the whole on the 17th.
Second by Yossi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes. Adjourned. Light intermission, then we'll start our regular council meeting.